Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be reviewing for your quiz on Monday. All right, let's get started. So for question numero uno, okay, we're looking at the following function. We could rewrite this as y equals mx plus b. This would be a linear function. You must know the differences between each function. Here we have our two absolute value bars. So this would be an absolute value function. Absolute value function. Over here, because I have x as the variable in the exponent, so we have the exponent is the variable. This will be an exponential function. And then last but not least, because I have the x squared, that's a quadratic. Okay, so again, because it has the x squared. All right, so moving on to the next question, we have exponential growth and decay. You need to remember that a growth, what's inside the parentheses, has to be greater than 1. And then for a decay, so for a decay, what's inside the parentheses will be less than 1. All right, so if we look at these two examples, look at the first one, notice that the number inside the parentheses isn't greater than 1. So because this is greater than 1, you're looking at a growth. Now what's important for you to note is how much this grows by. So if I look, how much greater than 1 is this? Well, it's 0.06 greater than 1. To make that a percentage, I'm going to move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, leaving me a percentage of growth of 6%. My initial value is always the number out front. That is my 575. Okay, now let's look at the next one. See if you can try this on your own. How much less than 1 is this? So notice we have 0.76 is less than 1. That has to be a decay. Your percentage is not 78%. That is wrong. Don't get fooled by that. That will be on your quiz. It's how much less than 1 is this? Well, 1 minus 0.78 is 0.22. If I move the decimal over to the right twice, that's a 22% decrease. The initial value, again, is always right out front of the parentheses, would be 40. All right, let's move on to the next piece. Question 3 is talking about the formula, so I need you guys to actually understand what an exponential function is. So a is going to be that initial amount, and it's also the y-intercept. Don't forget this piece. A lot of you guys keep forgetting that it's also the y-intercept. R is going to be that rate of growth or decay, and that's always going to be written in here as a decimal. You need to know how to make it into a percent. And then lastly, why is this exponential? It's because there is an x or a variable in the exponent, which I'll highlight over here in blue. Okay, be careful not to confuse that with the quadratic. While the quadratic does still have an exponent, the quadratic has an x squared. All right, let's take a look at the next question. So question 4 says to algebraically solve for all of the x values. Oh, there's my puppy. Hang on. Okay, so because we're looking at a quadratic, because of the x squared, so because this is x squared, this is a quadratic. You must know that. So to solve a quadratic, you have to set it equal to 0. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. You guys have 3 ways of solving this, and I'm going to go through each one. So you can fast forward or rewind, however you would prefer, but I'm going to show you how to do this with quadratic formula, how to factor, and complete the square. So first, we'll do the quadratic formula. You will be given this on your quiz. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so we know a is going to be 1. There's technically a 1 out front. B is going to be negative 8, and C is going to be 12. Now, if I use the quadratic formula, I'm just going to plug this in. All right, so now that I've plugged in everything, and don't forget parentheses. You need parentheses for everything that you're inputting. I will be left with x equals 8 plus or minus. Now, what's underneath that square root, please be reminded, you should be putting what's underneath the radical in the calc. Do not include the radical. So when I put that in the calculator, let's see what we get. We get 16. So I'm going to write that there, and that becomes a 2. So if I clean this up a bit, I have x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 16 is 4 all over 2. All right, I'm going to start to clean this up a bit, but hopefully you understand the idea that you have to do what's underneath the radical before you square root it. Otherwise, you're going to run into some complications. All right, so still continuing with the quadratic formula, I just clean this up a bit. I have x equals 8 plus 4 all over 2. We have to split this into 2. And I have x equals 8 minus 4 over 2. When I simplify this, I get x equals 12 over 2, where x is 6. And then I have x equals 4 over 2, where x is 2. And we are done. We solved this by using the quadratic formula. So the first one's done. We can check that off. Now, again, if you are satisfied with quadratic formula, you can fast forward through this. The next piece I'm going to show you is how to do this by factoring with our master product. All right, master product is next. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. We're going to multiply the first with the third term. So I have x squared times 12 is 12x squared. And we're going to break this up. What are two numbers that multiply to 12x squared but adds to negative 8x? So we want to multiply to 12x squared but adds to negative 8x. And what would that be? Let's think. All right, let's think. Would negative 6x and negative 2x work? Yeah, that does work. Negative 6x times negative 2x is positive 12x squared. And when you add these two things up, you get negative 8x. All right, so now we can split the middle. I have x squared minus 6x minus 2x plus 12 equals 0. The next step, while using our master product to have gotten that 12x squared, we found those two numbers that multiply to 12x squared but adds to negative 8x. The whole point in that was to split the middle, which is what we did here. We split the middle. Now what we want to do is factor out the GCF from the first two and last two terms. I can divide this out by x. I'll be left with x minus 6. And I can divide this out by negative 2. If I divide out by negative 2, I'll be left with x minus 6 equals 0. These things inside of the parentheses must match. If they don't match, we did something wrong. Then we're going to take a look at what's left on the outside, which is our x minus 2. So now we can group. I have x minus 2 times x minus 6 equals 0. Don't drop the equal 0. Because both of these things are going to equal 0, now I can t-chart. When I t-chart this, I have x minus 2 equals 0 and x minus 6 equals 0. When I solve for x, I'll have x equals 2 and x equals 6. And we are done. That's how we would do this by using the master product and factoring. All right, lastly, I'm going to show you how to do this by completing the square. Again, you can fast forward through this. If you would like to see this, you can keep watching. All right, so I'm going to check off. We know how to do this now with factoring. Our last method is now to complete the square. So to complete the square, you guys have to remember we have to subtract over our c value. So now I'll have x squared minus 8x plus blank, put in that nice little box, more like a box, not a rectangle there, and then negative 12 plus blank, whatever is going to go in that box. You have to remember next, always this comes first. You always write that immediately below. That x squared minus 8x plus blank, you're going to write immediately below that x in parentheses squared because we're completing a square. Okay? All right, so we're going to have the b term. So if I have the b term, whoops, half of negative 8 is negative 4, and then I'm going to square it. Have it, then square it. Negative 4 squared is 16. That goes in both boxes. Now this whole thing right here is this. And we are going to bring down what's on the right-hand side, which is equal to 4. All right, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I have x minus 4 squared equals 4. Now, to get rid of a square, we square root. So I'm going to square root both sides. I'll have x minus 4 equals plus or minus 2, because the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. All right, I'll split it. I have x minus 4 equals 2, and x minus 4 equals negative 2. When I solve for x, I'll get x equals 6. Solve for x, and I'll get x equals 2. So now we have done this by quadratic formula, factoring, and completing the square, all of which any 3 methods could be asked of you on your quiz. All right, let's keep going. All right, so next we want to subtract this from this. You got to remember, from comes first. From comes first. So we actually have 3x squared plus 1 minus 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. Now what you have to remember is that that negative gets distributed into every single term. So I have 3x squared plus 1. When you distribute that negative, you have minus 6x squared minus 5x plus 4. Start to combine like terms. I'll have negative 3x squared minus 5x plus 5. All right, so you just got to remember, from comes first and distribute the negative throughout. Let's take a look at number 6. Now, just recall there was a typo on my answer key posted online, so I'm going to go through this anyways. All right, so which of the following are the factors? Now, we have to use factoring, factor by grouping, right? There's factoring. I have x squared minus 13x plus 30. Now, if this is multiple choice, guys, and it's on your quiz, you should be putting all of these into the calc. I'd put this in y equals and compare it to every single one of these. Put all of these in the calc and see which one's going to look the same. Okay? So, let's do this though by hand, just in case if you have this as a part 2 question. Got to multiply by your master product. You'll have 30x squared. Now we have to think. What multiplies to 30x squared but adds to negative 13x? So let's think. I have 10x and 3x. Okay, while that does multiply to 30x squared, that's not going to add to negative 13x. So let's try something else. What about negative 15x and positive 2x? Okay, well, negative 15 times positive 2x is going to get me to negative 30x squared. So let's think of something else. Let's try negative 10x and negative 3x. Okay, so negative 10x and negative 3x, when multiplied together, you'll get positive 30x squared. And if you add negative 10x and add negative 3x, you will get negative 13x. So that checks out. So now we know how to split the middle of this. We'll have x squared minus 10x minus 3x plus 30. All right, let's start to factor. You're going to take out the GCF from the first two and take out the GCF from the last two. I'll be left with x times x minus 10 minus 3 into x minus 10. Remember, these need to match. And I'll look at what's left over. So now I have x minus 3 times x minus 10, and those are my two factors. I'm done. All right, let's move on. So, you guys need to remember your vocab. I'm noticing a lot of people are confusing product and sum. You need to know product is multiplication and actually show it. If I ask you to show the product of two numbers, actually multiply them. If I ask you to sum two numbers, I need you to actually add them. Okay, and then subtraction would be difference, and quotient goes with division. These are important vocab words, guys. They show up all the time, and you will see this on Monday. All right, moving on. So question number 8. Question number 8 talks about an investment. So you invest $550 in a savings account, which has an annual interest rate. So this thing is growing, okay, because I'm putting it in a savings. He has made no deposits or withdrawals on the account for 4 years. We want you to write a function f of t. So it's saying write a function f of t that can be used to find the amount of money in the account after t years. So we're not going to be using x, we're using t. And you'll end up rounding to the nearest dollar. And we want to find the balance after 4 years. So we know that this is dealing with a growth. Because this is dealing with the growth, you need to know we're going to be doing 1 plus the rate. Okay, so this will be 1 plus. If this is my original, y equals a times 1 plus or minus r to the x. Here we're using t now, and we're only going to be dealing with a 1 plus for the growth. So the initial amount we know that was invested was the $550. We know that it's growing at this percentage. Now, when you write this in the parentheses, guys, you have to remember this 1.8% needs to be turned from a percentage to just a decimal as the rate. So to make this go from percentage to decimal, we got to move it to the left twice. So this will be plus 0.018 all to the t. So to fill this in for the function, we're going to write f of t equals 550 times 1 plus 0.018 to the t. That'll get you full credit. Now the next piece asks for you to find the amount of money in there after 4 years. Okay, so now we got to do this after 4 years. So all you guys are going to do is plug in t to be 4. So you'll have f of 4 equals 550 times 1 plus 0.018 raised to the 4th. And when you put this in your calculator, you end up getting $590.88, or sorry, not 88 cents, 68 cents. And it asks you to round to the nearest dollar. So that will be $591. Okay? So again, a question like this will be on your quiz tomorrow. Very similar. You got to make sure, though, you guys remember to change this 1.8% into the correct decimal form. Okay? All right. Now, I did go over number 9 in class, but in case we forgot, let's do a quick overview here. We're giving you an interval. I'm not asking you to graph the interval. I'm giving you an interval to find the average rate of change. You need to remember this means slope. Now, the equation for slope is y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Again, which will be on your quiz. This exact question, just with different numbers. Okay? If I give you this interval, you guys need to know to use the endpoints. So that's going to be my x1, oops, right here. This will be my x1, and this will be my x2. Because it's an interval for finding the slope, you need to use the endpoints. I'm just reiterating that fact. So if I look here, I'll put my x and y values, where I know I'll have -3 and 3. I'll have -3 and 3, and again, I'll have -3 and 3. So you guys should just put these all in the calc. When I put this in the calculator, when y equals 10x, okay, the y values that spit it out, and again, you could also just do this in your head. What's 10 times 3? You'll get 30. What's 10 times -3? You'd get -30. Okay? Again, if I did this in my head, I have 10 times -3 squared. You'll get +90 and +90. And then last but not least, if I have 10 to the x, which again, you could just put this in your calc. When x is -3, you'll get 0.001. And then when x is +3, you'll get 1,000. Now, just to save some time, I'm not going to do this for all of them, but you guys have to do the slope 3 times. So I'll model the first one for you. You have the slope will equal 30 minus -30 all over 3 minus -3. Now when you do this in the calc, you'll get your slope here to be 10. Again, over here, if I do this by hand, I have the slope will equal 90 minus 90 all over 3 minus -3. and you'll get m equals 0. And now over here, I'll have 1,000 minus 0.001 all over 3 minus -3. And I'll get a slope here to be 166.665. This asks for you to write them from least to greatest. So you would have g of x, f of x, and h of x. Again, this will be on your quiz, so please be sure to review this concept. All right, moving on. So, question number 10 is asking you to look at a system of equations. Guys, you gotta know your systems of equations. So now, we need a let statement. I'm gonna let x equal the number of cupcakes, and I'll let y equal the number of brownies. Now, let's look at this. We have 3 packages of cupcakes and 6 packages of brownies that result in $36. Then we have Carl bought 2 packages of cupcakes and 5 packages of brownies for $28.25. So I'm going to write out my system. My first equation is going to look like 3x plus 6y equals 36. Guys, it's in the writing. Equations is plural. You need 2. Okay? All right, now the next one was 2x plus 5y equals 28.25. So now if you wrote this, this will get you a full 2 points. So you get +2. Now the question though asks you to actually solve this. So we have to remember, how the heck do we solve systems? This was on your mini quiz. Anyone remember? It's by substitution and elimination. I'm going to go with elimination here. I just think that will be easier. So if I look, I want to eliminate x. I can multiply the top and the bottom by a number that will help me cancel the x value. So let's see, what do 3 and 2 have in common? Like, what do they share a multiple of? They share a multiple of 6. So if I put this in, I have, if I multiply the top by -2 and the bottom by +3, this is what I'll be left with. I'll have -6x minus 12y equals -72. And then the bottom equation, I will have +6x plus 15y equals +84.75. Now, if I were to solve this, notice the whole point was to get these x's to cancel, which they do. -6x plus 6x just goes away. I have 3y equals 12.75. When I solve for y, I'll get y equals 4.25, and that's the cost per brownie. But now we're not done. This asks for the cost of a cupcake and the cost of a brownie in dollars and cents. So this is my $4.25 for the brownie. You have to plug this back in either to the top equation or the bottom equation. And when you plug this in to solve for x, you'll get x equals $3.50. And that will be the cost for a cupcake. Okay? We're going to move right along to question number 12 because I told you guys to skip number 11. So question number 12, guys, is literally just asking you to graph. All you got to know is how to graph. So f of x, I'm going to put this in the calc. G of x, I'm going to put this in the calc. That's all you're doing, just graph. G of x is a linear function, so that's going to look like a line. You need to know the red is a quadratic because of the x squared. Blue is a linear function because that's written in y equals mx plus b form. All right, I'm going to graph the blue first, and then I'll graph the red. All right, I have them both graphed. So I graphed blue first, and then I graphed the red quadratic function. And the question is asking to state all values of x for which f of x equals g of x. Guys, you got to read directions. It says state the values of x. It does not say state the points of intersection. State the values of x, where they intersect. So if I look, when x is 1, they intersect. And when x is, let's see, -2, they intersect. Do not, this would be bad, do not give me the points because it asks for the values of x. So if you wrote 1, 1 and negative 2, let's see, negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, negative 2, 7, you would be wrong. This is not going to get you any credit. You got to read directions. It says state the values of x. All right, last question, and then we're done here, guys. All right, so what I was noticing, the reason why I put this on the review sheet is because a lot of you guys didn't know your different sets of numbers. Okay, this does show up, unfortunately, so I need to show it to you. So, you need to know positive real numbers, guys, could be anything like pi, like 7/8, like 0.3 repeating. Any positive real number could be a decimal. It could be an irrational number. Okay, but it's all numbers, positive real numbers. So what would satisfy positive real numbers would not deal with people. You cannot say people would satisfy that category because you can't have 0.3 repeating of a person. Okay, so positive real numbers would satisfy, let's see, answer choice D. Those would be your positive real numbers. Okay, negative real numbers would then have to be what's remaining, B. Okay, again, negative real numbers could be negative 0.3 repeating, negative pi. You could have negative 0.126, etc. Okay, I'm just giving you some other examples so that way you have them to look at. So I'll write these back up here, etc. Okay, positive integers, guys. So positive integers could talk about people. You could have 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, etc. That would be letter C. So positive integers, think of people. You can't have negative people. Or think of cars. Cars would be an example. You can't have negative cars. Okay? Negative integers is now dealing with the opposite. So instead of, positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you would have negative 1, 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, etc. So that will be letter A. Okay? And now integers, all integers, would be including negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. in both directions. Okay? So that would be letter E. And then lastly, whole numbers. This shows up a lot. Whole numbers includes the number 0. So that would be F. So you can have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay? All right, guys, I hope this helps. Please leave me feedback if there's anything else you could use some more clarification for. And I wish you the best of luck tomorrow on your quiz, and good luck studying. All right, hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.